Ferrari just turned the new 2026 rules into an advantage, and what they've discovered inside their engine could completely flip the fight for Miami. We're talking about a team that was losing up to half a second in qualifying, suddenly finding a way to recover performance without breaking a single rule, while their biggest rivals just lost a hidden boost worth up to 100 extra kilowatts. That should have only closed the gap, but it didn't. Because Ferrari didn't just catch up, they may have found a smarter way to use power altogether. And if this is real, Miami won't be about who has the fastest car. It will be about who understands energy better than everyone else. At the beginning of the season, Ferrari looked close, but incomplete. They had a fast car, no doubt about that. Strong in the corners, stable over long runs, and surprisingly consistent when others started to struggle. But every time qualifying came around, the same thing happened. They were just missing that final edge, that last fraction of performance that turns a good lap into pole position. And for a while, it didn't make sense. Because if you watch the car through the middle of the lap, Ferrari looked right there with Mercedes. Sometimes even better. But then, right at the end, they would lose it. And that's where the Real story begins. Because that final loss wasn't about driving. It wasn't even about the engine being weaker. It was about timing. Other teams had found a way to release energy at the exact last moment of the lap, creating a short burst of acceleration that Ferrari simply didn't have. So even when Ferrari did everything right, they were still losing at the finish line. Now here's where everything flips. That advantage is gone, completely removed by the FIA. No more last-second boost, no more hidden surge, and suddenly, the entire grid is forced to play a different game. But here's the part most people didn't see coming. Ferrari wasn't built around that final burst. They were built around something else entirely. Consistency, balance, energy efficiency across the entire lap. Think of it like running a race. Some runners sprint at the very end to win. Others control their pace from the start, never wasting energy. Before, the sprinters had the advantage. Now, the rules force everyone to run evenly. And that's exactly where Ferrari becomes dangerous. Because instead of relying on one explosive moment, they can spread their performance across every corner, every straight, every acceleration point. And that might not sound dramatic, but it is. Because in Formula One, small gains repeated over an entire lap become massive. Now add one more layer. The new rules don't just remove energy. They limit how it can be used. Less total energy in qualifying. Less boost during the race. More control over how the system behaves when the battery is full. Which means one thing. You can't waste anything anymore. Every bit of energy matters. Every decision matters. And this is exactly where Ferrari's system starts to shine. Because their car doesn't just generate power. It manages it, smoothly, predictably, almost like it's always one step ahead of the driver. And that's not an accident. Their entire concept, especially the way they combine aerodynamics with energy recovery, allows them to recharge more efficiently through medium speed corners. While others are trying to regain energy on the straights, Ferrari is already building it in the corners, quietly, constantly, and that creates a completely different kind of advantage. Not a visible one, not a sudden burst, but a continuous flow of usable performance. And this is where the idea of a secret engine trick starts to make sense. Because it's not a trick in the traditional sense. It's not breaking the rules. It's not exploiting a loophole. It's understanding the system better than anyone else. And using that understanding to be faster everywhere, not just at the end of the lap, which leads to a very uncomfortable realization for the rest of the grid. While they were chasing one big advantage, Ferrari may have built a car that doesn't need one. And if that's true, then Miami won't be about catching up anymore. It will be about trying to understand something Ferrari already solved. But here's where things get uncomfortable, because once you understand what Ferrari is doing, you start to see why this isn't just an improvement. It's a shift in how performance works. Because up until now, most teams were thinking in peaks. Short moments of maximum power, sudden bursts, aggressive deployment, everything built around gaining time in one single phase of the lap. But the new rules kill that idea. They flatten performance. They force every team into a narrower window where spikes are limited and everything becomes more controlled. And that creates a problem. Because if you're used to relying on those spikes, you suddenly lose your biggest weapon, which is exactly what happened to teams like Mercedes. But Ferrari? They were never dependent on that. So instead of losing something, they gain clarity. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Because when performance becomes smoother, more controlled, more predictable, the real battle shifts to something else. Decision making. When do you deploy energy? How long do you hold it? Where do you release it for maximum effect? And this is where Ferrari starts to separate itself, because their system doesn't just react. It anticipates. Think of it like driving in traffic. Most drivers react to what's happening in front of them. Brake when needed, accelerate when there's space. But the best drivers, they read the flow ahead of time. They know when to lift, when to push, before the situation even happens. That's Ferrari right now. Their energy deployment isn't just about the present moment. It's about what's coming next. And that changes everything. Because instead of wasting energy correcting mistakes, they avoid the mistake entirely. Now connect that to Miami, a circuit where traction zones, short straights, and constant acceleration phases define the lap. It's not about one long straight. It's about repeated bursts of acceleration, over and over again. And in that kind of track, smooth energy delivery becomes more powerful than raw power. Because every clean exit from a corner builds into the next one. Every small gain multiplies. And suddenly, the car that looks slightly better becomes significantly faster over a full lap. But here's the tension. Because while Ferrari may have found this balance, executing it under pressure is something else entirely. Miami is unpredictable. Grip levels change. Temperatures rise. And the new rules also affect how torque is delivered when the track is slippery or unstable. Which means one mistake in energy deployment and the car can lose traction instantly. Too aggressive, you slide. Too conservative, you lose time. There's no margin. And this is where the so-called engine trick becomes a double-edged weapon. Because it only works if everything is perfectly synchronized. Engine, energy system, aerodynamics, driver input, all aligned. If one piece fails, the advantage disappears. But if it works, it creates something almost invisible. A car that doesn't fight the track. A car that flows through it. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Because other teams won't see a clear weakness to attack. No sudden drop in performance. No obvious mistake. Just a constant, controlled pace that slowly pulls away. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's already too late to respond. So now the question isn't whether Ferrari is faster. It's whether anyone else can disrupt that rhythm. Because if they can't, then Miami won't be decided by a dramatic moment. It will be decided quietly, lap after lap, corner after corner, until one team realizes they were never actually in control. And this is where the entire story reaches its breaking point, because now it's no longer about who built the best system. It's about who can survive it under pressure. Because Miami won't give Ferrari a clean environment to execute this perfectly. It will do the opposite. Short sessions, sprint format, less time to understand the car, less time to adjust, and that turns even the smallest miscalculation into a massive consequence. Now think about what Ferrari is trying to do. They're not relying on one big advantage. They're relying on dozens of small, perfectly timed decisions repeated over an entire lap. That's powerful, but it's also fragile. Because if you get one of those moments wrong, the whole chain breaks. Miss the energy release on corner exit, you lose speed on the straight. Lose speed on the straight, you arrive slower to the next braking zone. Arrive slower, you compromise the next corner. And suddenly, a tiny mistake becomes a full lap lost. That's the risk. But here's what makes it even more intense. Other teams don't need perfection to fight Ferrari. They need disruption. One aggressive move from Red Bull. One unexpected strategy from Mercedes. One safety car at the wrong moment. And that smooth, controlled rhythm Ferrari depends on is gone. And this is where the mental side of the race begins to matter. Because Ferrari isn't just managing a car. They're managing expectation. For the first time this season, they're not chasing. They're expected to fight for pole. Expected to fight for the win. And that pressure changes how decisions are made. Do you push harder and risk breaking the balance? Or do you stay controlled and risk being attacked? There's no safe answer. Meanwhile, Mercedes is watching, adapting, waiting for the moment where precision beats flow. And Red Bull is lurking, ready to turn any instability into opportunity. So now, everything converges into one final scenario. Late in the race, gaps are small, energy is limited, tires are fading, and every system is pushed to its limit. This is where Ferrari's engine advantage is truly tested. Not in perfect conditions, but in chaos. Because if their system holds together, if the energy is deployed exactly when needed, if the balance remains stable, if the driver executes every phase correctly, then something very subtle will happen. They won't pull away suddenly. They'll just stop being catchable, little by little, corner by corner, until the gap is real and no one understands exactly why. But if it fails, if one moment is mistimed, if one deployment is off, if the rhythm breaks even slightly, then everything collapses just as quietly as it was built, and someone else takes control. That's what makes Miami different. It's not about discovering who is fastest. It's about exposing who truly understands this new era of Formula One. Because all these changes, all these systems, all this hidden complexity, they've been building toward one final truth. The advantage is no longer in the engine alone. It's in how the entire car thinks, reacts, and flows through a race. And Ferrari might be the first team to truly understand that. So when a race begins, don't just watch the overtakes. Watch the rhythm. Watch the consistency. Watch which car looks calm when everything else feels on edge. Because that's where the real advantage lives. And that's where Miami will quietly reveal whether Ferrari just improved, or whether they've discovered something the rest of the grid is still trying to catch.